Britain. In the early years of Arthur's reign, Britain was still a fractured land, full of rival kings, fragile alliances, and wars that could erupt without warning. Arthur was not yet the great legend of later stories, but a young king still proving his strength in battle and his right to rule. It was during this uncertain time that troubling news reached him. Rience, King of North Wales, had gone to war against King Leodegrance of Camelot. Arthur held Leodegrance in high regard and had every reason to despise Rience, so he marched to Camelot with king's ban and boars and 20,000 men at his back, ready to throw himself into yet another war. Arthur meets Guinevere. It was the moment King Arthur laid eyes on Guinevere for the first time. She was Leodegrance's daughter. Eventually, he tied the knot with her. We'll save that story for another time. Kings Ban and Bors then bid their farewells. They made their way back to their homeland. King Claudas stirred up quite a bit of chaos there. King Arthur was eager to join them, but they turned down his offer. They replied, "Not right now. You've got a lot on your plate back home. Thanks to the treasures you've bestowed upon us, we'll be able to recruit a whole bunch of valiant knights. With a little divine help, we'll take a stand against King Claudas. Should we find ourselves in a pinch, we'll be sure to call on you. Just give us a ring, and we'll be there in a flash. No ifs, ands, or buts about it." Bellicent's visit. Once the two kings bid farewell, King Arthur set off for Caerleon. His half-sister Bellicent, who happened to be married to King Lot, paid him a visit. She arrived as a messenger, but her real mission was to gauge his strength. She was joined by a noble entourage, including her 4 sons, Gawain, Gaheris, Agravain, and Gareth. Upon laying her eyes on King Arthur and the grandeur of his knights, she decided to ditch the idea of seeing him as an enemy. Instead, she spilt the beans about her husband's schemes against him and his throne. The king received her with great courtesy and honour, as befitted her noble rank and royal standing. He welcomed her warmly and kept her at Caerleon for quite a while. King Lot, her spouse, turned into an even bigger foe of King Arthur. He loathed him intensely, harbouring a deep and enduring grudge. Arthur's troubling dream. King Arthur experienced a truly extraordinary dream. It made him quite uneasy. He envisioned a realm brimming with blazing griffins and slithering serpents. They set fire to everything and caused chaos for everyone around. In his dream, he battled them. They really did a number on him, leaving him with serious injuries and almost sending him to the great beyond. In the end, he triumphed over them and vanquished them all. Upon waking, he was greeted by a weighty spirit and a flood of profound thoughts. He pondered the possible meaning behind the dream. Eventually, he found himself stumped, unable to uncover an answer. To clear his head, he geared up for a hunting trip with a big crew. The Questing Beast. In a grand entrance, the king strolled into the forest. He spotted a magnificent stag right in front of him. He kicked his horse into gear and galloped after it. He pursued the hart for quite a while. Eventually, his horse gasped its last and collapsed right under him. He watched the hart make its getaway while his horse lay lifeless on the ground. He plopped himself down next to a fountain. Once again, he plunged into a sea of deep thoughts. He sat by himself, convinced he could hear the distant sound of hounds barking. It looked like there were around 30 of them. As he glanced upward, a peculiar creature came into view, drawing closer. It was something he had never seen or heard of before. The beast dashed over to the fountain and took a refreshing sip from the water. Its head looked just like a serpent's. It boasted the body of a leopard and a tail that could rival a lion's. Its legs resembled those of a stag. From its belly erupted a sound, reminiscent of a chorus of baying hounds. It sipped in silence. It was eerily silent inside. Before you knew it, it was all over. Then It departed with quite the bang. The king was utterly astonished by all that surrounded him. He was so tired that he quickly dozed off. Eventually, a knight made his way over to him. The knight, weary and lost in thought, inquired, "Oh, fellow knight, did you happen to spot a peculiar beast wandering by?" "I spotted someone like that," King Arthur remarked to the knight, "but they're now a good 2 miles off. What would you do with such a creature?" "My lord," the knight declared, "I've been keeping an eye on it for quite a while. I've taken my horse out of the race for good. I wish I had another chance to keep my adventure going." Just then, a yeoman showed up, leading another horse for the king. The knight, spotting it, eagerly asked to be granted the horse. "I've been on this quest for a whole year," he remarked. "I'll either reach my goal or spill my finest blood." Back then, King Pellinore was hot on the trail of the questing beast. Yet he was a stranger to King Arthur, just as King Arthur was a stranger to him. "Sir Knight," King Arthur declared, "cast aside that quest and let me take it on. I'll chase it for another year." "Oh, you silly soul," the knight remarked. "Your wish is as useful as a chocolate teapot. Only I or my family can make this happen." He made his way to the king's horse. He hopped onto the saddle and declared, "Thanks a bunch. This horse is officially mine." "Well," the king declared, "you can take my horse if you must, and I won't complain, but until we find out who rides better, I won't be content." "Look for me here," declared the knight. "Whenever you feel like it, you'll find me hanging out by this fountain." With that, he carried on with his adventure. King Arthur pondered deeply. He called for his yeomen to fetch him another horse, and fast. Merlin revealed. As soon as they abandoned him, Merlin made his grand entrance. He was dressed up as a 14-year-old kid. He approached the king and inquired about his brooding demeanor and weighty expression. "I might feel a bit pensive and weighed down," he remarked, "because right here, at this very moment, I've just seen the strangest thing I've ever encountered." "Oh, I'm well aware of that," Merlin replied, "just as much as you are, and I'm privy to all your thoughts too. Worrying is just plain silly. It won't do you any good. And guess what? I know who you are, and I'm familiar with your parents too." "That's simply not the case," King Arthur replied. "How could you possibly know? Your years just don't cut it." "Yes," Merlin replied, "but I grasp the details of your birth far better than you do, and even better than anyone else on this planet." "I refuse to believe you," King Arthur declared, his frustration directed at the child. Merlin departed and came back as an octogenarian. The king was delighted to see him, as he seemed both wise and well respected. Then the old man inquired, "What's got you looking so glum?" "For a multitude of reasons," King Arthur declared. "Today has been a day full of oddities. A child was just here a moment ago. He shared insights that felt surprisingly wise for someone his age." "Yea," said the old man, "but he spoke the truth, and he had more to share if you had only let him. Let me share the reason behind your sadness. It seems you've managed to ruffle some divine feathers recently. Deep down, you know the truth, even if the rest of the world is blissfully unaware." "What are you?" King Arthur exclaimed, rising pale, "to bring me this news?" "I'm Merlin," he declared. "I was also him in the child's likeness." "Ah," remarked King Arthur, "you are quite the impressive and genuinely intimidating fellow. I have a whole bunch of questions for you today." While they chatted, a rider came into view, leading the king's horses. King Arthur hopped on one, while Merlin chose another. They rode off to Camelot side by side. On their journey, Merlin revealed a prophecy to Arthur concerning his demise. He even predicted his own demise. "War against the Saxons!" King Arthur triumphed over the kings who had put off his coronation. Now he turned his attention to the Saxon heathens. They continued to stir up mischief across various parts of the land. He rounded up his knights and men-at-arms. They rode to York together. Colgrin, the Saxon, commanded a sizable army. A magnificent clash unfolded. It was a lengthy and gory affair. He shoved Colgrin into the city and put him under siege. Baldulf, Colgrin's brother, made a stealthy entrance. He arrived with a whopping 6,000 men in tow. They aimed to take down King Arthur and break the siege. King Arthur was well aware of him. He dispatched 600 horsemen and 3,000 foot soldiers to face him. They went ahead and did this. They encountered them at the stroke of midnight. They wiped the floor with them. The enemy ran for the hills, desperate to save their skins. Baldulf was engulfed in profound sorrow. He chose to dive into danger alongside his brother. He decided to go for the clean slate look, shaving both his head and beard. Next, he put on a jester's outfit. He strolled into King Arthur's camp, strumming a harp and belting out a tune. Slowly but surely, he made his way toward the city walls. Before long, he unveiled who he really was. They used ropes to haul him into town. As Arthur gazed at the city, news came in. 600 ships had brought a whole lot of Saxons ashore. Childeric took the lead on the eastern coast. He called it quits on the siege and marched straight to London. There, he rounded up more soldiers and had a chat with his barons. They chatted about ways to send the Saxons packing for good. King Arthur, joined by his nephew Hoel, the king of the Armorican Britons, assembled a mighty army. They hurried off to Lincoln, where the Saxons were busy laying siege. He engaged in a fierce showdown. Over 6,000 men lost their lives. In the end, the main group decided it was time to make a hasty retreat. He trailed behind them into the Celadon woods. They found refuge among the trees. They held their ground and fought valiantly for quite a while. He commanded the trees in that section of the forest to meet their lumberjack fate. No shelter, no hiding place in sight. The trunks and branches formed a sturdy barricade. Their getaway was officially thwarted. After 3 days on the brink of starvation, they finally proposed to hand over their treasure of gold and silver. They were eager to set sail right away in their vacant ships. They also vowed to honor King Arthur when they got back home and decided to leave some hostages until the tribute was fully paid. He took the deal. So, he finally let them go. The Battle of Badon Hill. After a few hours at sea, they found themselves regretting their rather embarrassing getaway. They spun their ships around and docked at Totnes. They wreaked havoc across the land, stretching all the way to the Severn. They set fire and wreaked havoc on all sides as they marched toward Bath. King Arthur discovered their treachery and their comeback. He was filled with anger, and his eyes sparkled with intensity. He pledged with great seriousness. He wouldn't stop until he had taken down those foes of both God and humanity. He set his sights on booting them off the land of Britain for good. He strode confidently with his troops toward Bath. He addressed them, saying, "These heathens have no loyalty to me or to God. I vowed to safeguard this realm. Today, I shall seek vengeance for the blood of all who have fallen in Britain." Next, the Archbishop took the floor. He perched atop a hill. He shouted that today they would battle for their homeland and for paradise. He declared, "Anyone who falls in this sacred battle will be welcomed by the angels." In this case, death serves as both penance and a clean slate for all sins. At those words, every soldier in the army simmered with a profound rage. They were itching to face off against those wild ones. King Arthur donned gleaming armor, embellished with gold and jewels. Perched atop his head was a helmet adorned with a golden dragon. He wielded a shield adorned with the image of the Blessed Mary. He donned Excalibur and grasped his trusty lance, Ron, in his right hand. He gathered his troops and marched them out to confront the foe. The enemy were poised for battle on the slope of Badon Hill, neatly arranged in their signature wedge formation, as per tradition. They braved the onslaught of King Arthur and his troops. On that day, they really fortified their defence. Under the stars, they took a break on the hill. The next day, Arthur rallied his army for another round of battle. They encountered wounds and losses of a magnitude never witnessed before. One step at a time, he drove the enemy back until he and his most valiant knights found themselves atop the hill. He was the centre of attention for the men around him. He was as red as the rising sun. He raised his sword and knelt to plant a kiss on the cross adorning it. And then he got up. He and his companions charged at the enemy together. They prowled like a pride of lions on the hunt. They shoved the enemy across the plains, battling fiercely until exhaustion finally caught up with them. On that fateful day, King Arthur found himself all by his lonesome. With Excalibur in hand, he took down 470 heathens. Talk about a busy day at the office. Colgrin and his brother Baldulf met their untimely end. The king then ordered Cador, Duke of Cornwall, to chase down Cheldric, the chief leader, and the rest of his forces without mercy. He took hold of their fleet. He packed it with his select crew. They were all set to fend off the enemy as they attempted to make a run for it. He pursued them relentlessly, dispatching them without a hint of mercy for as long as he could keep up. They tiptoed stealthily, hunting for a cosy hideout among the trees and peaks. Yet they discovered a distinct lack of safety. Cador tracked them down, picking them off one at a time. At long last, he managed to catch and eliminate Cheldric. He also triumphed over numerous foes and captured hostages to guarantee the surrender of the rest. Victory in the north. King Arthur pivoted away from Badon Hill. He rescued his nephew Hole from the clutches of the Scots and Picts. They had him cornered in Alclud. After conquering 3 tough battles, he drove them toward a lake. This lake was truly something special. 60 rivers flowed into it. There were 60 islands and a delightful assortment of 60 rocks. Every island boasted 60 nests for eagles. King Arthur set sail with a grand fleet. He navigated the rivers and laid siege to them from the lake. It went on for a solid 15 days. Countless individuals endured and perished from starvation. The King of Ireland showed up with his army to lend a hand. Arthur didn't hold back. He confronted him with gusto. He bested the king, sending him scurrying back to his own territory in a panic. He chased after his goal. The aim was to wipe out the Picts and Scots. They had consistently been a thorn in the side of the Britons with their ruthless antics. He was tough on them, with no room for mercy. At long last, the bishops and clergy from that beleaguered land came together. With holy relics in hand, they made their way to the king, all while sporting their best barefoot look. They arrived to beg for mercy on behalf of their people. When they were presented to him, they dropped to their knees. They pleaded with him to save the handful of survivors from their tribe. They sought a spot in the world where they could enjoy a little tranquility. After listening to their cries and recognizing he had dished out enough punishment, he finally relented and granted their request. He then commanded his troops to put an end to any more violence. He made his way back to his own realm and arrived in York just in time for Christmas. He took in that sacred moment with a serious air. He was heartbroken over the wreckage of the churches and homes brought about by the pagans. He put them back together and brought the city back to its joyful glory. The Knighting of Sir Griflet. One fine day, the king found himself in the company of his barons. A squire rode in on horseback. He hoisted a wounded knight onto his shoulders. The knight was on the brink of death. The squire had a chat with the king. He mentioned that in the forest, a knight had pitched a pavilion next to the fountain. This knight had taken down his master, the valiant knight known as Niels. The squire requested the king to lay his master to rest and to dispatch a valiant knight to seek vengeance for his demise. A young squire, Griflet, boldly stepped forward. He was as old as King Arthur himself. He approached the king, seeking knighthood as a reward for his valiant service. "You're quite young and delicate," remarked King Arthur, "to shoulder such a hefty responsibility." "Sir," Griflet said, "I request to be made a knight." Merlin suggested that the king should oblige. "All right then," Arthur declared, "let's make it happen." And with that, he knighted him on the spot. He then remarked, "I've granted you this favour. All right, it's time for you to return the favour with a gift." "As you wish, my lord," replied Sir Griflet. "You have my word," replied King Arthur. "By the faith of your body, after you've had your joust with this knight at the fountain, make sure to return to me right away, unless, of course, he manages to slay you." "I swear it," declared Sir Griflet. He hopped onto his horse in a flash. He readied his shield and grasped a spear in his hand. He galloped with gusto until he arrived at the fountain. Sir Griflet's joust. There he spotted a magnificent pavilion and a splendid horse, all saddled up and ready to go. A colourful shield and a long lance dangled from a nearby tree. Sir Griflet gave the shield a good whack with the tip of his spear. He whacked it until it tumbled to the ground. Out of the pavilion strode a knight. "Fair knight, what prompted you to bring down my shield?" he inquired. "Because," Griflet declared, "I would joust with you." "I'd advise against it," said the knight. "You're fresh on the scene, a newly minted knight. Your strength is a mere whisper next to my roar." "Well, despite it all," declared Sir Griflet, "I'm still up for a joust with you." "I'm not exactly jumping for joy," replied the knight. "Well, if it's a must, then I suppose I'll just have to roll with it." They spaced their horses out quite a bit. Then they lunged at one another. The peculiar knight splintered Sir Griflet's spear into pieces. He jabbed Sir Griflet right through the shield and into his side. His spear shattered within Sir Griflet, leaving the truncheon stuck in place. Sir Griflet and his trusty steed took an unexpected tumble to the ground. Upon witnessing the knight's tumble, the peculiar knight was overcome with a wave of sorrow. He hopped off in a hurry, convinced he had just sent the poor guy to the great beyond. He took off his helm, giving him a chance to catch his breath. He looked after him with great care until he finally woke up. With the truncheon of his spear still lodged in his body, he hoisted him onto a horse. He entrusted him to God and noted his resilient spirit. He was convinced that if he made it through, he'd emerge as a legendary knight. Sir Griflet galloped his way to the court. Thanks to some talented doctors, he got back on his feet. He was saved just in the nick of time. Rome demands tribute. At that moment, 12 elderly gentlemen presented themselves before the king. They were the emissaries of Lucius Tiberius, the Emperor of Rome. They insisted on tribute for Caesar from Arthur's domain. They cautioned that failure to comply would result in the emperor unleashing destruction upon him and his territory. King Arthur boldly declared that he owed no tribute to the emperor and had no intention of sending any his way. He declared, "In a fair contest, I'll give him his due, with a sharp spear and sword. By my father's soul, he will take that tribute from me, whether he likes it or not." The ambassadors stormed out, fuming, and King Arthur shared their frustration. Arthur's secret duel. The day after Sir Griflet took a tumble, the king commanded that his horse and armour be taken outside the city walls before the sun had a chance to rise and witness the spectacle. He got up bright and early, even before the sun had a chance to stretch its rays, and hopped onto his trusty steed. He grabbed his shield and spear, then told his chamberlain to hold the fort until he got back. He decided against taking Excalibur, having entrusted it to his sister, Queen Morgan le Fay, for safekeeping. As the king ambled along, he spotted 3 rascals hot on Merlin's heels. They planned to go after him and end his life. He spurred his horse onwards and bellowed, "Run, peasants, or meet your doom!" At the sight of the knight, they took off like startled hares. "Oh, Merlin," exclaimed the king, "you would have met your end here, despite your impressive skills, if I hadn't just happened to stroll by." "Oh, come on now," Merlin replied. "If only I had the power to save myself. You're definitely ahead of me in the race to the finish line. Unless divine intervention steps in, you're currently on a one-way trip to your grave." As they chatted away, they found themselves at the fountain. A lavish pavilion stood proudly beside it. At the entrance of the tent, a knight stood waiting. He was decked out with weapons and lounging in a chair. "Sir Knight," King Arthur inquired, "what brings you to this spot? Are you here to joust with every knight that rides by? If so, I suggest you reconsider that approach." "I've stuck to that tradition," the knight declared, "and I plan to keep it up. If anyone disagrees, they're welcome to make a change." "I'll take care of it," declared King Arthur. "I shall guard it with my life," the knight declared. The knight mounted his horse, ready for action. They charged at one another, lances clashing with a mighty force. Splinters flew as both lances shattered. King Arthur unsheathed his sword, and the knight shouted, "Not so. Let's have another go with sharp spears." "I'd be happy to," replied King Arthur, "but alas, I'm out of spears." "I've had my fill of spears," declared the knight. He summoned a squire, who promptly returned with 2 fine new lances. They spurred their horses onwards, charging at each other with tremendous force. Each warrior snapped his spear in hand, the tension palpable. The king, undeterred, reached for his sword again. The knight shouted, "Hold on a moment. You are the finest jouster I've ever faced. For the love of knighthood, let's have one more round." With a mighty charge, they clashed. King Arthur's spear shattered, while the knight's weapon stood strong. He delivered a fierce blow to the king, sending both horse and Arthur tumbling to the ground. King Arthur was furious. He unsheathed his sword and declared, "I will battle you now, Sir Knight, on foot. My honour has been tarnished while riding." "I will ride a horse," declared the knight. But when he spotted his opponent approaching on foot, he quickly dismounted. It just felt too shameful to flaunt such an obvious advantage. A battle to the brink. Then the fierce battle truly began. Blow after blow crashed between them, heavy and relentless, as though neither man meant to leave the field alive. Their swords rang against shields and armour with such force that fragments of steel and splinters of wood flew around them. Before long, both were bleeding, and the ground beneath their feet was darkened by the struggle. After a brief pause, to catch what little breath they could, they threw themselves at one another again, colliding with the fury of wild beasts until both were dragged down to the earth. At last, their blades met in one terrible stroke, and the knight's sword shattered the king's. Then the knight said, "Now you are in my power. I may spare you, or I may end my life here. Yield and live." But Arthur answered, "When death comes, I will face it. I would rather die where I stand than surrender myself in shame." With that, he sprang at the knight, seized him by the waist, and hurled him to the ground. In a single motion he tore away the man's helmet, only to find that he was no ordinary warrior, but a huge and powerful knight. Then they grappled like men possessed, each straining for mastery, until at last the knight forced Arthur beneath him, ripped the helm from the king's head, and raised himself for the final blow. At that very moment, Merlin appeared and cried out, "Stop, knight! If you kill this man, you will bring ruin upon this realm. You do not know who lies beneath you, but he is worth more than you can imagine." The knight drew back for a moment and shouted, "Who is he?" And Merlin answered, "Arthur Pendragon." At those words the knight froze. For a heartbeat, the whole struggle seemed to stand still. He had not known that the man beneath him was the king himself. Before anger, pride, or confusion could drive him to strike, Merlin used his power and cast the knight into a sudden sleep. His body slackened at once, and he fell back from Arthur without another word. Merlin quickly lifted the wounded king onto the knight's horse and led him away from the fountain. Arthur, still shaken and bleeding, looked back and said that he would rather have lost a year of his kingdom than see so noble a knight killed. But Merlin assured him that the man was not dead, only sleeping, and that in time he would become one of Arthur's greatest allies. That knight, he said, was King Pellinore, a man whose strength and destiny would one day be bound to Arthur's court. So Arthur rode on to Caerleon, bruised, battered, and with far more to think about than when the day had begun. He had seen the questing beast, met Pellinore, and once again found Merlin standing at the edge of fate, guiding his life toward a future he could not yet fully understand. This encounter was more than just a duel in the wilderness. It was another sign that Arthur's path would not be shaped by simple victories, but by strange meetings, dangerous tests, and the kind of men who might first try to kill him, only to one day stand beside him.
This was Arthur before the glory was polished into legend, a king still being shaped by battle, prophecy, and the dangerous men around him. And if this was only the beginning, then the road to Camelot was always going to be written in blood, ambition, and myth.